Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine. I have an update for you on the Starbucks story, the Starbucks boycott / the Amazon rainforest story that I've been doing for you on Twitter at Book of Katherine, Katherine. So if you guys have been with me for a long time, some of this will be familiar to you, and if not, then I'll catch you up a little bit here. So we have been doing on YouTube, or not just YouTube, Twitter, all the platforms basically, even Wix, any kind of blog. Over the last few years, there have been what the headlines call conservative sweeps, but those of us who are actually online know were just dumps. Anyone who isn't actually working for an advertiser, who isn't actually connected to the broadcasting networks or the broadcasting stations, or actually working for a big advertising company, isn't already one of their sponsored partners. They basically erased or deleted all of their channels, deleted all their channels or demonetized all their channels or wiped away all that, or put algorithms over it. So it eliminated all the rights of any kind of citizen. It was kind of terrifying, especially for people who are used to having rights in their country, people who had made a living in their country, even people who were like photographers, people who were used to making their living doing photography, had great photography channels. But if they didn't have a channel through Nikon, if they weren't advertising Nikon, they were out, and they were just without a job, and that was it, So it was, the advertisers were truly going through and saying, like, this is it, this is our channel. And we learned why that is. We learned what had happened, like, the advertisers had gone through and said, like, why didn't our candidates win? And they got consultants, and the consultants came back within days and said, this is why. It's all these platforms and all this sharing that was going on these platforms. It's been allowing all of this free speech and everything. And they were like, oh, well, nope, that we're just going to lock it all down so that it literally reflects what's happening on the TV stations. And it did. You will literally, it's almost identical to what's happening on the TV stations now. There's almost no difference. And it's really kind of sad. It's hard to try and find varying content or whatever. It's really kind of a fight. And entire blogs were deleted or whatever. So I suggested that we do a Starbucks boycott because I looked up who these advertisers were. They kept saying the advertisers were coming for us. They were the reasons all these sweeps were happening. So I was like, let's look up the advertisers. And the top 20 advertiser that kept coming up for every single platform across the board was Starbucks. In fact, Facebook we had thought the worst perpetrator. It turns out that, Facebook was the worst perpetrator. It turns out YouTube might have been. Facebook and YouTube, they're all, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say which one's the worst. I mean, YouTube has the most users, so it's kind of, and they erased the most. So, it's hard to say who did the worst, who promised the most to their people. It's really hard. Anyway, but basically, we went in there and Starbucks was making 38% of its revenue off of Facebook. So we already knew at that time, in 2018, February of 2018, we knew how much Facebook was we knew by then 40% of just conservative sites alone had just seen their no traffic to their sites. We knew by then 40% of their site traffic had just dropped from Facebook to where it had been consistently going. And conservatives knew that. So anyway, we were, it's now come out that it's not just, it's just all across the board. It's only lobbyist sites, which means anything owned by, this thing. It's not a conservative thing at all. That's almost like a sales tactic in itself, is to say it's conservatives. No, it's just anything based in scientific fact or anything like that. And if anything, saying conservative only pushes people more towards those conservatives that they actually sponsor, unfortunately. So I kind of hate that term. But they coined it, conservative sweeps. Anyway, back to Starbucks. So we did a boycott on Starbucks, and that made me dig into Starbucks a little bit more. And what I learned there was about their global reports and about their hiring practices and things like that. And one day, doing a dig into them, I learned that they had been launched as a New York Stock Exchange member, even though they had only 140 stores in America. They only had 140 stores. And they moved from 140 stores from only having 6 stores in 1987. Now, 1987, as we know, is when that first wealth gap popped open, and when the Brundtland Report was first launched at the United Nations, when the very first, beginnings of UN 21, the very first, this actual document was first entered in. It wasn't signed, it was first entered in 1987. And so there's only 6 stores. Then it was bought and it was pushed up into 140 stores with the new owners by 1992. And they got it onto the New York Stock Exchange. And what's very, very interesting is that I had noticed that within just this short time of June, they launched it June 26th. Even though it only had 140 stores, even though it was only worth like $25 million, only 140 stores, even though it had only been from 6 stores to 140 stores and had a small percentage of the market, they launched it on the New York Stock Exchange. And it just boomed. It went to 100 times its value per share. 100 times in like a year, in like 1 year or 3 months. Just boomed just in time for the signing in New York of Agenda 21. And I pointed that out on my channel on at Book of Katherine, Katherine, at Book of Katherine. On Twitter. I had pointed that out on April 16th, 2018, I believe. And I was saying, look at this. Like, it's a 70 times growth, 100 times, per share. This is an insane growth for any kind of stock. Didn't anyone notice in 1992 that Starbucks just out of nowhere, from June to September, or this small 3-month to 1 year window, just skyrockets of a value of 70 to 100 times its value, just like, doesn't anyone notice that? But now we notice now looking back, we can say like what happened. Back then I was like, what did they just all like, did it have to do with also the number of stores has just boomed worldwide. Then it was just in America, just in Seattle. Now it's totally, it's everywhere. It's all worldwide, 75 countries, which doesn't even make sense why it would be in 75 countries. Not even that many countries have enough freedom or wealth to buy a $4, cup of coffee. That's impossible. No one has that kind of wealth. America at that time was still selling 50-cent cup of coffees. Like, it doesn't make any logical sense. Why are they in 75 countries? Name another country that can afford it except for probably China. Like, name another one. Maybe the Commonwealth. Anyway, so what was interesting was I was like, no, June 26th, 1992, that is literally the end of Rio Earth Summit. That's literally when Rio Earth Summit closed in Brazil. And at that point, the Amazon rainforest was still up. They had just finished doing Fern Gully. They had just finished putting Fern Gully in all the children's classrooms. They just have in Fern Gully, all the teachers' unions were required to show it in the classrooms. So even though it wasn't a big box office hit, it was still in all the kids' classrooms. That's the #1 place. Like, just like Inconvenient Truth wasn't a big box office hit, but every single kid knows it. Every kid was indoctrinated with it. Every kid thinks they have to tax themselves to death to save the planet and do whatever the king and queen of Britain says, whatever they pass down at their UN climate change conferences, whatever they pass down at these climate change conferences, because all they put on it is save the planet. Whatever the speech laws they say, they pass down speech laws in here. They pass down tax law in here. They pack down transportation laws. They pass down what size your building should be, what size your house should be, what kind of heater you should have, what kind of washer you should drive, what kind of, all in the name of like every single aspect, 17 areas of your life. Speech, clothing, face makeup, everything. And what they do is they say, because it'll save the planet. Don't tell me you haven't bought makeup based on, oh, you think it'll save the planet. They found a great way. Kings and queens and monarchs of this world just said, oh, we'll tell them they have to save the planet. If they don't, they'll kill the planet. They found the one heartstring to yank. And you never say, give me proof. You never say that. Tell me why buying palm oil will save the planet. You know, because if you look at the company making the palm oil, you find out they're the ones polluting the planet every single time. BASF, every country they're in. You know, 400 tons of trash are going into the ocean every year in China and India. And no one seems to care at all. No one says at climate change conferences, let's go after the companies. They all say, let's go after the citizens, tax the citizens. No one says tax the companies that are polluting the earth. Why is that? Ever wonder why that is? All the monarchs of the earth, why Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles aren't out there saying, you know, in their good things for climate change, saying, we should really, really tax all these companies. When they pollute, we should tax them hard. Every time they pollute, we should fine them. That's what Americans do. If they pollute, we fine them. Interesting that they don't do that. Probably because they own those companies. Anyway, so what's interesting is we look back and literally from June 26th, after this Rio Earth Summit is signed in Brazil, to that next year, that's when the rainforest totally goes down, and then it's signed. This is signed at New York. And then over those, when Starbucks booms, literally the same rate Starbucks booms is the rate the rainforest is deforested in the Amazon. And I'm like, that's why the stock went, you know, because they finally had a way to get super cheap crops. The Brundtland report was turned in 87. They raised capital. They got 140 stores, but they raised capital by saying, we're going to go after the Amazon. And they launched it, and they were able to, that's why everyone at the UN is an investor. Sustainable investment. And that's why Chuck Grassley's going down there, and why Chuck Grassley needs to be replaced, because he goes down there and he gives reports on how well the crops are doing down in the Amazon rainforest for you. And he works for Iowa. And yet Starbucks is pushing the diversity, which is also in here, Agenda 21. At the Earth Summit Climate Change Conferences, they talk about diversity and inclusion agenda. And what is it? It goes against the Civil Rights Act. It teaches to do favoritism based on your genetics, based on your religion, based on your faith, based on your gender, based on everything. Literally the opposite of the Civil Rights Act. And that's what Starbucks hires on, to the point that literally 10% of the population makes up 54% of their hires. That's how much Starbucks is into Nazism for the globe. That's why German Chancellor was the one who signed it and had the biggest round of applause in 1992. Should see how many celebrities were there. Look up the Royals. All right, pretty big update. Always good to get more confirmation on our research. All right, love you guys. Bye.